Hello and welcome back. Now that you're here, we can talk about chapter 261. And this one was a massive bomb that Gege dropped on all of us. First, we're going to go over the objective events of the chapter, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on it. So let's get right into this plot twist of a chapter. The chapter begins with Yuji crushing Sukuna's heart while thinking about Choso, having gained the advantage due to Toto and the Black Flash that capped off the last chapter. The smoke clears and Sukuna is so shocked that he stops casting his domain expansion and focuses his full attention on Gojo. He knows that it can't possibly be the real Gojo, so he takes a better look only to find familiar stitches across Gojo's forehead. Realizing who he's looking at, Sukuna immediately knocks away Yuji, lending more support to Urame's statement that his power fluctuates depending on his interest. And Sukuna excitedly shouts out to the man that looks like Gojo, saying that he's sorry for underestimating him and that he didn't think that Yuta Okkotsu was capable of going this far. Somehow Sukuna was able to instantly recognize that it was Yuta and not Kenjaku. We then flash back to the events of the time skip, where Yuta announces that he intends to have Rika devour Kenjaku to use his body swap technique in the event that Gojo loses. Kusakabe wonders why Yuta can't just copy the limitless technique or the Six Eyes, and Shoko explains that just as Sukuna said in the fight against Yuji and Yuta, you cannot use the limitless technique without the Six Eyes. And of course, the Six Eyes are just a body part that Gojo was born with and can't be copied by Yuta's technique. Maki then voices her concern and disdain for this plan and asks what will happen to Yuta when the 5-minute copy window is over. And in response, Meimei explains that Kenjaku's technique could work in 3 possible ways. First, it could be a constant activation technique where Yuta would have to consistently reapply the body swap technique, in which case he would die as soon as the 5 minutes were over. The second scenario is that Kenjaku's technique is intermittently activated on some specific time interval, and in that case Yuta would eventually die after the 5 minutes. And finally, it's possible that Kenjaku's technique is in fact a one-time use, in which case he would be able to live in Gojo's body for the rest of Gojo's natural lifespan. But she also voices the possibility that Yuta's technique might not be able to transfer to Gojo's body with him, and in that case he would be stuck as Gojo forever. Kusakabe says that the plan could work, but feels inhumane, which prompts Yuta to lash out in frustration, saying that defeating Sukuna is more than worth throwing away their humanity. Yuta asks if everyone is afraid of becoming a monster to fight Sukuna, and Maki responds that they are just worried about him. This enrages Yuta even more, as he asks about Gojo and how no one worries for him, and they've all just been pushing the burden and role of monster onto him all by himself. And Yuta is more than willing to take his place as a monster if no one else is up to the task. Yuta then directly approaches Gojo and tells him that he plans to take his body if he dies. Gojo mirrors Sukuna from the Yorozu fight and says that he doesn't plan to lose, but ultimately he doesn't care what happens to his body after he's dead. They briefly talk about Yuta's lineage, and according to Uro, Yuta is a member of the Fujiwara clan. Gojo says that they share a common ancestor with the Sugawara clan, meaning that Yuta has the lineage of the 2 most powerful Heian-era clans. And Gojo goes as far as to say that Yuta might have been born into more power than him. So if he can't use that powerful advantage, he essentially sucks and begins to train him in cursed energy efficiency. Gojo tells his students that things will return to normal if Gojo and the higher-ups are all dead after the Culling Games, due to Gakuganji's leadership, and asks his students not to follow him as he assumably leaves to kill the higher-ups. Yuta asks him not to try to become a monster alone, and Gojo responds while thinking of Geto that he can't do that because he was left behind outside of KFC and that he needs to catch up. We then flash forward to just after Yuta's domain being destroyed, and he was teleported to safety. Yuta's friend Amai, who was given a technique by Idol Transfiguration via the Culling Games, explains that his technique involves sugar and can be used to boost Choko's medical efforts. Yuta lays completely bisected, but Arata prevents the wounds from worsening, just as he did in Shibuya, to buy Yuta time. Yuta manages to maintain consciousness thanks to Rika, and as his brain is placed into Gojo's body, Shoko tells him to use maximum output reverse curse technique to heal his stitched up body. After one last flash forward back to the modern day, we see Yuta and Sukuna both open their domains using a single hand, as the narrator explains that Gojo already showed Yuta how to beat Sukuna's domain via his own battle against the great monster. The chapter ends with the devastating clash of Malevolent Shrine an unlimited void, and of course, another break. Now we're going to transition the video to the opinions section. First off, I have to say that I'm glad Choso isn't getting completely forgotten about. So the chapter definitely started off strong with that. And I also really appreciate the mechanical explanation of how Yuta and Kenjaku's techniques would interact by Meimei. It feels like Gege hasn't been explaining things as in-depth as they used to, and this is a beautiful return to form in my opinion. Yuta pointing out the other sorcerer's hypocrisy about Gojo was a really strong point for the chapter in my opinion, which leads us to a few narrative parallels that I'm seeing, and I'd like to get the discussion going in the comments. First, we see this theme surrounding humanity and monsters. Just like Geto in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, Yuta has reached his breaking point and needs to discard his humanity to accomplish his goal. Whereas like Gojo, Yuji flirts with the idea of giving up his humanity by eating his brothers, but he ultimately couldn't free himself of his human heart. This, of course, has dire implications for Yuta's future. I believe that Gege is creating a pattern where our characters are very lucky and prosperous and fortunate until they tip over the edge of becoming a monster. In this chapter, we see Gojo decide to catch up to Geto and kill the higher-ups, which he only half-heartedly considered up until now. This accompanied by Gojo's statement that the world would go back to normal if he dies, along with the higher-ups, marks the moment where Gojo stopped being the strongest in my opinion. As much as Gojo says he doesn't plan on losing, he ultimately fails to utilize the assistance of his companions to their full capacity, and tries to match Sukuna as a monster instead of a man with ideals, of fostering in a new generation of powerful allies. Like Yuji does, much to Sukuna's annoyance. Now, matching Gojo's hypocrisy, Yuta decides to become the monster alone, when just pages ago he was telling Gojo not to, and this narrative will almost certainly lead to Sukuna claiming another victory. I believe Yuji's role in the story is to show the strength of conviction, and that the true purpose that monsters like Sukuna lack will always cause them to eventually fall short. Where Sukuna will only try his hardest when superficial stimuli arouse him, Yuji tried as hard as he could to get stronger every single day of the time skip, painstakingly working towards his goal, and Sukuna's fickle personality and cursed energy has already caused him to suffer several severe disadvantages. He constantly makes things harder on himself because he's aimless and bored instead of actually trying to accomplish something. It's undeniable that if he took every fight as seriously as he did against Maki, that the Jujutsu sorcerers would have been long dead already. But instead, he maintains this meaningless strength that Gege refers to as being a monster. I find this plot thread really interesting, but for the sake of brevity, I'll wrap up this section and possibly continue the discussion in the comments. When it comes to my personal rating of the chapter, unfortunately, it just barely falls short of the 10 rating, due to Gege continuously overshadowing their characters, first with Choso's sacrifice and now with Yuji and Toto's triumphant battle being interrupted by Yuta. It feels like they refuse to let anything have the time and attention it deserves recently, so I'd have to rate it an 8, and hope that Yuta can finish his battle without some wacky side characters returning to interfere for a few chapters. Thanks for watching. I didn't know what to think when these leaks dropped, but I'm glad that Gege was able to subvert our expectations and keep us on our toes this late into the story. And I hope you are as excited as I am to see what happens next. But either way, I hope you stay safe and take it easy.